This happened earlier also, but this is like during the call, it's just like attention please. So take it in that spirit. Good afternoon, everyone. Professor Sanjay Kathuria ji, distinguished speaker this afternoon. Fellow deans of various faculties, Professor Ritu Gaur, Dean Research and Development, Professor Deepa, Dean Mathematics and Computer Sciences, Professor Ravindra Pratap, Dean Faculty of Legal Studies, and my very dear colleagues from the Department of International Relations, Dr. Jayashree Vivekanand, Chairperson of IR, Dr. Ananda Mustafiz, sitting right here. I'm extremely happy and deeply grateful. Professor Kathuria would find time for us out of his very demanding busy schedule. Is a matter of great delight and fortune for all of us. I extend to you, Professor Kathuria, a very warm welcome, along with very sincere gratitude on behalf of South Asian University, Institute of South Asian Studies, all our departments and faculties. This is, he said he would certainly not mind it, but he would enjoy it because he always enjoys his interactions with students, including his classes at Ashoka University. Before I have the honor of saying a few words about him as introduction, let me request our Dean Research and Development, Professor Ritu Gaur, to present a bouquet on behalf of all of us to Professor Sanjay Kathuria. Thank you very, very much indeed. Just before coming in here, Professor Kathuria was in conversation with our Vice President, Professor K.P. Agarwal. It was a short meeting, but such a rich conversation that happened between these two visionaries. And both of them were sharing with each other and with me their, how should I say, firm commitment to the idea of South Asian togetherness. We were talking about India-Pakistan relations. He was telling us about his long experience with the World Bank, the programs that World Bank had initiated about the youth of these two countries. And we were talking about the uniqueness of South Asian University, where we have students from Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and this year Maldives, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And it was a fascinating discussion about borders, boundaries, and you know that the motto of South Asian University is knowledge without borders. Just a few words about the Institute of South Asian Studies. Under Regulation 8 of South Asian University, this is a novel concept. Institute of South Asian Studies will act as a think tank. And the idea is that we will think together, we will dream together, and we will work together for better futures for all of us. The Institute is now getting operationalized, and as I said, I feel deeply honored, hugely honored, that the first event of Institute of South Asian Studies is taking place this afternoon, and we have a very distinguished economist, visionary Professor Sanjay Kathuria. He is a visiting senior fellow at the Center for Social and Economic Progress, India. He is also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University and visiting faculty at Ashoka University. Earlier, he was a lead economist at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. and he spent a very long time there, more than 20 years, 27 years in the World Bank. And he told me that one of the reasons he decided to leave World Bank, he had another 6-7 years to go, was his commitment to South Asia. He had limited time, he had so much to accomplish globally, but his heart and his mind, his intellect are in the subcontinent, for the subcontinent. He is one of the leading thinkers and commentators on economic integration in South Asia and the economic development of the region. For 27 years, as I said, he worked at the World Bank. He worked in South Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean and the Eastern Europe, including field assignments in New Delhi and Dhaka. Before joining the World Bank, he was a fellow at the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations in New Delhi from 1982 to 1992. His most recent books include the following: World Bank Publications, Regional Investment Pioneers in South Asia, 2021, Unleashing E-Commerce for South Asian Integration, 2020, Strengthening Cross-Border Value Chains, Opportunities for India and Bangladesh, in 2020, Playing to Strengths, a Policy Framework for Mainstreaming Northeast India, 2020, A Glass Half Full, The Promise of Regional Trade in South Asia, 2018, and Towards New Sources of Competitiveness in Bangladesh, the Bangladesh Diagnostic Trade Integration Study, which he co-authored in 2016. He has written extensively on issues relating to economic growth and development, technological change, trade and globalization, regional integration, and the economics of small states, among others. He writes regular opinion pieces for different media outlets, including the Indian Express, the Hindustan Times, the Business Standard. He is on the editorial board of the journal Rising Asia. He is a PhD in economics from Oxford University as Inland Scholar, and he graduated from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and completed his master's at the Delhi School of Economics. His areas of interest and expertise are trade, connectivity and regional integration in South Asia, economic growth and development in South Asia, trade, competitiveness and globalization, gender and development. So with just these few words of introduction, may I now have the great pleasure and honor of inviting Professor Sanjay Kathuria to share his insights with us.
Good evening, young friends. It's an absolute honor to be here with you. It's my first time at South Asian University, and thank you for the very kind words, Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi. I believe I may have spoken to students from South Asia University in the Delhi office of the World Bank some years ago, when actually we were launching one of our reports, this Glass Half Full. I believe our outreach people had actually got some. Excuse me. So, as I said, my first time, classroom setting works great. As you know, I teach, and I'm quite used to now teaching in classroom, so it's as good as any venue. So no fears on that. And of course, it is one of my passions to actually talk to youngsters, to students, and that's why I teach. That's why I was never a teacher. I was always a policy wonk, doing research. But I think I realized that the importance of talking to youngsters in a place where there is, in South Asia, where there is so much political baggage in the region. So I felt that it's important that at least I convey what I have to say. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay. I do want to get a sense of where people are from. How many of you are not from India? Raise hands, please. Okay. All right. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go country by country. Okay. So how many from Bangladesh? Okay. How many from Nepal? Bhutan? Pakistan? Not here today? Okay. Afghanistan? One. Seoul? Maldives? No. Sri Lanka? Alright. Okay. Pretty good. Pretty good. That's diversity. Alright. Good. So, the South Asia regionalism, is it relevant today? I mean, you're all from South Asian University, but maybe some of you don't believe in it. How many of you believe that it's not relevant? Nobody? Everybody? You're being, don't worry if your professor is here. you can say, it's academics is a free enterprise. No, I'm just kidding. So, it's good that you believe in it, and for me, in some sense, the question is also obviously a rhetorical one. Okay. Okay. So, world prosperity, right? At the end of the day, that's our bottom line. Right? That's our goal for development. Is that we want to see in the World Bank, they used to say world without poverty. Right? But overall, when you think of prosperity, and not country-wise, but region-wise, which regions come most to mind? Europe, North America, and East Asia. Okay? Alright. These are the three regions which are prosperous. What's the defining common feature amongst all three regions?
Industrialized.
Sorry?
Regionally, the cooperation.
Yeah, exactly. So they trade a lot with each other, they invest a lot in each other, they talk to each other, they travel to each other, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the basic theme. So you might say, in other words, guess I have to be near this. I can't travel. Or can I get a roving mic? Ah, okay. It will be better than I can see this. Yeah. You can hear me? Okay. So you can trade your way to prosperity, right? Now you will get quite disheartened at seeing these numbers if you don't know them already. When I wrote the book in 2018, The Glass Half Full, this actually figure was over 5%. Sorry. Quite sensitive. There you go. Okay, I shouldn't touch it, you know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will use it. So South Asia trade now amongst ourselves, it's less than 5%. Okay. ASEAN is over 21%, and East Asia, which includes non-ASEAN countries like Japan and Korea and so on. Then if you add them up, then it's over 30%, right? I'm not even going to Europe. That's like we're talking of in the 60s and 70s. Okay. All right. Now, let's look at this. Connectivity indicators. This is air connectivity indicators between selected bilateral pairs of countries. And this is pre-COVID, so it's not distorted by, whatever. There has been, as you know, crash in travel after COVID, which hasn't fully even recovered to this day. So this is number of flights per year, right? Now, why is flight connections a good indicator of connections? What does it tell me? How many flights do you have to a city or a country? What is it telling me? Yeah, people to people. Yeah, very good. Sorry? But, and what does it sort of reflect?
It's a high level of
High level of?
high level of connectivity, high level of political
Yeah.
Business investment and transactions.
Right. It's very good. Actually, it is not a merely, of course, people to people connect, very important. But it is also an indicator of, or it helps. It helps trade. It helps investment. In fact, you cannot do investment. You're putting a lot of commitment. If you invest in another country, you have to go there and see for yourself, right? What are you letting yourself in for? So air connectivity is actually a very nice indicator of the levels of engagement between two countries overall. In some sense, it's even better than trade because it's broader. It reflects many other things. Now, in South Asia, we were very proud. In fact, in Glass Half Full, we even did a case study of India-Sri Lanka air connectivity. There were lots of improvements. There was a bilateral air services agreement, and air travel snowballed between India and Sri Lanka. And it was by far the most significant pair. Colombo flying into 10 cities in India and so on. So it was a very, very significant relationship. Okay? By far, South Asia's best bilateral. Okay? India, Sri Lanka. So this is per year. 2017, 7,594. India, Bangladesh, which is a much bigger entity. You should have thought that there would be far more flights, but that's only less than 4,000. Now hang on to your hats, if you're not metaphorically, but Singapore to Indonesia. Singapore is a tiny country. Indonesia is much bigger one, but one side is very small. Okay. Right? Look at the number of flights here. I did it again. There you go. So 27,000 flights a year. Indonesia, Malaysia, well, it's the chart is 30,000 plus. Okay. So when you come here, I don't know how easy was it for you to come to New Delhi. How many of you had a direct flight to Delhi, those from outside India? And how many had to go roundabout? Non-direct. Everybody came direct? Oh, that's good. Okay. Normally when we do meetings in places like, so Delhi I guess is better connected than, but when you do a meeting in Kathmandu or in Colombo or Dhaka, it's usually not all the capitals are connected directly. Even they should be, right? But it's not. So very often, not very often, it's always easier from a logistic point of view to convene a meeting in Bangkok or in Dubai for a South Asia meeting. Just simply, it's just easier to travel, it's easier to get visas, in fact, in these countries for all South Asians, right? So, if we are outsourcing our meetings to Dubai and Bangkok, sometimes even to Singapore, our South Asian meetings, a lot of these, even when I was in the World Bank, we used to host meetings of South Asia. Often we used to do it in Bangkok or Dubai. Once we did it even in Singapore. Right? So, and this is not unusual. Okay. So the approach that I'm going to follow today before you is, you've heard this. The title is regionalism relevant? South Asia regionalism relevant? And regionalism obviously means that we're talking of all of South Asia. Now, obviously, there are lots of bilateral engagement happening between individual countries. There are sub-regional approaches, right? So, BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. And these are fine, by the way. I'm not putting them down. They actually could be stepping stones to the wider engagement in South Asia. Okay. But what I'm going to do today, and hope to lay out before you, and hopefully to convince you that there are huge costs to fragmentation of having these, especially if the fragmentation is conscious, like it is happening today, where we are basically leaving Pakistan and by extension Afghanistan outside the developments in the region. And I hope to convince you that this is very costly, this approach, for every single country in the region. So that's the sort of device that I will use. I will compare the sort of the fragmented approach with the all of South Asia approach. Okay. So, thing is you don't get to choose your neighbors, right? We know. Like you don't get to choose your family, you don't get to choose your neighbors. So, we had a South Asia project. It's now been 40 years in the making, since we started the South Asia project, the SARC project, and your university is very much part of this. But you would have seen that, there are various things around South Asia is artificial, it's not a real construct, and so on. And there is dissent about the idea of South Asia, it's something imposed by the Americans as a construct. I don't have any problem with those kinds of, well, I'm less worried about what you call South Asia. It matters, but it doesn't matter as much. What is more important is what you do with each other as South Asian neighbors. Right? That's what's important. And what you do with each other is the geography, as I said, the neighbors. The geography defines a lot of what you can do with each other and what are the possibilities with each other. If you don't engage with your neighbors, I will hope to convince you that the people will suffer. And as Prime Minister Manmohan Singh very famously said, borders cannot be redrawn, right? And we don't want to redraw any borders, but we can work towards making them irrelevant. right? So you integrate in a way that those borders matter less and less for business and transactions and people to people connect and all of that. Right? So obviously, as I said, my question on regionalism was rhetorical. If your lens is welfare, right, and as an economist, that's my lens, people's welfare, and I submit to you that should be everybody's lens, right? At the end of the day, whatever you do, foreign policy for development policy, it's all should be subservient to the goal of alleviation of poverty and people's welfare. Right? That's your ultimate goal. And so the regionalism, it is often said that, oh, India is too big. It's whatever, 85% of the GDP of the region, population, etc. In so many ways, it's so dominant, it doesn't really need the region. This is, many people have said this, respectable economists have often said this, that it's, as a large country, you don't gain much from integration because the other markets are very small, put together they're 10% of you. So why bother? So this is I'm setting this up as a straw man for you because I think that's a myth. It's a big myth that India does not gain or India does not need the region. I believe India's gains are very significant, both economically and strategically. Right? So on trade, simple numbers. If in times past, at one time, Bangladesh was in the top 5 markets, export markets of India. It's had some slowdown, some economic problem in the last 2 years. I'm not talking what's happened last few days, but in the last few years, a couple of years it's gone down. But still, it's a top 10 market for India. Okay? So Pakistan could be the same. So there's and trade. This trade is dynamic. It can grow. So it is trivial to say it is that trade doesn't matter or that trade India doesn't benefit from trade. Actually, it can benefit a great deal from trade. On connectivity, there is, as you know, India's northeast region is there, which is isolated. It's virtually cut off from the rest of India, and that happened after partition. And therefore, India needs for reducing the isolation of the northeast of India. India has had many initiatives with Bangladesh, and they have been going really well. And so that is the connectivity part, right? So India gains from that, and of course there is a win-win in that. And similarly, Central Asia. If Pakistan and Afghanistan were connected, then India would have access to Central Asia. Think of the old Silk Roads, right? So there would be a Central Asia connection. They did it. Okay. And then there's energy. Nepal. Bhutan, India already imports a lot of hydropower from Bhutan. Right? But the same thing could happen. So currently India is exporting power to Nepal, but it has also started importing. It's exporting power to Nepal, it's also starting importing. And in time it will become a big importer of power from Nepal, which is very good. Tourism. Again, there are very big gains in tourism, and I will come to a quiz question on that. And then there are strategic gains. Right? A good neighborhood, a neighborhood that India is carrying with it. Now this has been articulated for the last 20 years. Right? Through peace, if the neighborhood is peaceful and India is carrying the neighborhood along with it, obviously it's a strategic gain. It has to devote much less energies, military and otherwise. It is more on the positive energy side. So a neighborhood that goes along with India is in India's interest, which supports India outside. So there are strategic gains. So don't let anybody tell you that India doesn't gain from the South Asia project. Yes, it's a large country and it also has to create a lot of momentum to galvanize the South Asia project. But that it's just doing it for sheer altruism is not correct. It is very much of a part of the gains from South Asia. Okay. So the all of South Asia approach, I will look at through different lenses, different forms of economic engagement, which is trade in goods. There is global uncertainty today. US-China trade wars. There is the so-called China +1. I assume, do you know? Anybody knows what's China +1? Yeah. Go ahead.
So China Plus One is basically a strategy that a lot of labor-intensive manufacturing that is shifting out of China into a development that is G20 confluence that's happening in terms of the West, particularly the US, leading the French holding this.
Right. Yeah. So basically, yeah, exactly. That's what it is. So there's a lot of opportunities for the rest of the world, in particular South Asia, because India is seen, or India sees itself, not yet the promise has not been fulfilled, as the next China. It's a long way from there. That's a whole separate talk. But at least there are lots of opportunities on global trade, and therefore, if South Asia works with itself on trade, you can capitalize on some of the opportunities. I'll talk about tourism, I'll talk about energy, I'll talk about connectivity, and I'll talk about climate change. These are the 5 lenses through which I will talk about the all of South Asia approach versus the kind of deliberate, fragmented approach that we are in today. Right? Now, I do want to stress that does not mean that other groupings are not beneficial. Right? I'm an economist. I have to let the data speak for itself. Okay. There are many other groupings like BIMSTEC on the eastern side. There is CAREC on the western side. Central Asia regional, which Afghanistan and Pakistan and the 5 Central Asian countries are part of. So there is CAREC. There are many other groupings. So each of them have their different logic, and each is valid in themselves. But their validity does not invalidate the idea of South Asia. That's my basic thesis. Right? And if we don't behave like good neighbors, then we basically meaning that the opportunities to put people's welfare first are being lost. Okay. So trade in goods. Okay. So that's the first of our connectivity. The most obvious, when people talk of cross-border economic activity, the first thing you think about is trade. How much do you trade with your neighbor? Okay, so in the glass half full, we talked about, we came up with a number, some of you may have seen it, 1/3. South Asia trades with itself only to 1/3 of its potential in goods, just in goods. This was an underestimate because it's the model through which this is done. These are by inherently not dynamic, so it underestimates the gains. Right? But it's 1/3 of its potential, and that's the lower bound. 80% of this missing trade is India-Pakistan. Okay. Pakistan is the biggest loser in South Asia by far from the lack of economic integration with the region, with India and the rest of the region. Pakistan has many strengths in supply chains of medical equipment, sports goods. As you know, those who follow football will know, world footballs are made in Pakistan, surgical instruments, and so on and so forth. Right? So there can be very interesting supply chains formed with Pakistan in areas of their strength. If India-Pakistan happened, then actually Afghanistan reduces its isolation. Remember, currently, Afghanistan depends very much on, it's a landlocked country. So it has to trade how? Either via Iran or via Pakistan. Mostly through Pakistan. Overwhelmingly through Pakistan. But so it is dependent. Now, if overland trade were allowed between India and Pakistan, Afghanistan can also, access. Currently, is very limited trade that overland happens through the Wagah border of Afghanistan. There is a whole set of issues there. We can talk about it. But basic point is the India-Pakistan rapprochement, if it happens, will also help Afghanistan to increase its trade with the rest of the South Asia. And of course, similarly, if Pakistan exports to India, it can also export more to the rest of the region. So, as I said, reiterate, Pakistan loses out a lot on this. But every single country does as well. Okay. So trade in services. Okay. Currently, we only have we are only got the tip of the iceberg in services trade. Can someone tell me who is India's biggest source of tourists? No, overall.
Bangladesh. Bangladesh.
Correct. Does that surprise you? I'm sure it does. 20%, more than 20% of India's tourist inflows are from Bangladesh. And yes, medical tourism is also the number one from Bangladesh. Okay? Now, just imagine if what happened on now there's cultural affinity between East Bengal, West Bengal. Imagine if the same thing were to happen on the western side, between East Punjab and West Punjab, and more broadly, right? My own mother is from Rawalpindi, my father is from Dera Ismail Khan. Okay. I've been to Pakistan many times, thanks to being in the World Bank. I was able to get visas to go and so on. But I know it's not easy to go for any tourism. If you have family there, it's different. But if you just want to go as a tourist, but can you just imagine the kind of tourist inflows that would happen on both sides? So I would submit to you that what we are seeing in Bangladesh, India would get dwarfed by the Pakistan has, we're talking 220 million people and growing and counting. So there's a lot of business. So just one thing, tourism alone will show you the kind of possibilities that there are in the region. And there is a whole range of other services that we can talk about separately. Medical, as already happening, but there is also education, there is online service delivery, there's professional services, and so on and so forth, right? So there's lots that can happen. Okay, so that's on services trade, which is part of trade. Okay, energy trade. Okay, energy is a very low-hanging fruit in South Asia. Traditionally considered something that is the first thing that could happen to get over the lack of trust and the suspicion that we have with each other. And indeed, it is already happening. As I said, Bhutan is already exporting power to India, India is exporting power to Bangladesh and to Nepal. In time, Nepal will start exporting more and more, right? So in the last 7 years or so, 2015 to 2022, transmission capacity was doubled in South Asia. Transmission for power, that capacity has doubled, right? So there is actual stuff happening on the ground there. Okay. Again, we're leaving out Pakistan and Afghanistan in this process. But Pakistan and Afghanistan have almost one-fourth of South Asia's hydro capacity, right? So if you're leaving, and most of it is unexploited. So if we leave them out, then we're leaving out a big chunk of the potential. And hydro has all kinds of benefits, as we know. Environmental, you replace hydro fuel by fossil fuel. Hydro is also the renewable that does not have this peak load problem that other renewables have. So it's actually a very good source of power. And it's very good environmentally. And there is seasonal complementarity in power sources. So it's colder in Nepal when it is hotter in India. So it's easy to have that two-way. You can have two-way trade. Similarly between Afghanistan and Pakistan, because it's a hilly part. So there is a seasonal complementarities come into play with hydropower trade. Another big advantage when you include Pakistan and Afghanistan in the energy map is CASA-REM. What is CASA-REM?
Electricity market between Central Asia and South Asia.
Exactly. Very good. So Central Asia, South Asia, regional energy market. So in the World Bank, there is we actually proposed this, wrote up stuff on it, and we actually started a project like that called CASA 1000. So it's Central Asia. So the money, the power is coming from Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and then to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Stop there. Could have, but and that project is still under implementation, despite all the problems that we see in Afghanistan. That so far it's still going on. It took a long time to prepare, 10 years for that project to prepare before it went to the board of the World Bank for finance for approval. So on energy, it's a low-hanging fruit, and this CASA the CASA 1000 project, which is 1000 megawatts of power being exported. It was a nice indicator of the potential for hydro trade. Okay, so that's on energy. Now connectivity. Connectivity, you could think of the Grand Trunk Road, right? So again, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh used to say, I can think of, I would like to leave a South Asia, or I would like to, for my grandchildren, where you can have breakfast in Kabul, lunch in Lahore, and dinner in Delhi, and you can extend that to other countries. But problem is in South Asia, connectivity is a great problem. It's a concern, even without this fragmentation. Right? So, we have the highest trading costs in the world amongst countries of South Asia. Costs more to trade amongst them. So, it's cheaper for India to trade with Brazil than for India to trade with Pakistan. And now think where Brazil is and think where Pakistan is, right? This is because of all the restrictions, artificial problems we have created, right, for that trade. It becomes very expensive. So one of the reasons why trade is low in South Asia is because trade costs are very high, right? So, for example, one of these very old, 20th century practices is that you transload all your goods at the border. One truck comes, an Indian truck comes, goes to Benapole Metropole, dumps all its goods into the truck of Bangladesh, and then Bangladesh. So it's huge inefficiencies in doing that, and that's the practice by and large for most bilaterals in the region, with some exceptions in India, Nepal, and India, Bhutan. Some exceptions. They tried to change this through the so-called motor vehicles agreement between Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. Hasn't yet succeeded, but the whole idea is that if we extend this to South Asia, this kind of motor vehicles agreement, the idea was you have smooth, facilitated. You can just drive through with electronic, clearances and all of that. You have many international agreements, most famous being the TIR. You get a card net, you kind of bill it, and you just whiz through with minimal delays. We're nowhere there. But we can, in theory, there is no reason why we can't do it. And so if you think of the Grand Trunk Road of olden times, Sher Shah, we can connect Kabul, Islamabad, Lahore, Delhi, Calcutta, Dhaka, and then Chittagong, right? And if this happens, right, so if such connectivity happens, it will reduce costs and make trade more efficient. For that to happen, we will need to implement these cross-border transit agreements, right? So you have to allow the vehicles to, and it's very easy nowadays, with these GPS tracking to guarantee safety of the vehicles, that they don't go off course or they don't have contraband or whatever. A lot of security concerns about these can be addressed through technology. Okay. Then we're talking about climate change and the environment, right? So this I put in the must-have category, not in the good-to-have category, which was the previous one. But here, if you don't cooperate, then the situation is dire. Right? Let me just go through that. So by 2050, most of people in South Asia will be exposed to water scarcity by 2050. So 1.5 to 1.7 billion people. There's also, we know, cross-border air pollution. We know Lahore pollution comes to Delhi, to Amritsar, and vice versa. We've seen heat waves all across North India and Pakistan, and Bangladesh. The impact on people dying. There are food shortages emerging, fuel shortages because you need so much more for air conditioning and all of that. Right? In this situation, you really need regional solutions. Right? And why regional solutions good for this? Is because you need to build climate resilience. And you have similarities which help that. Right? So you have shared rivers, right? Between India and Bangladesh, how many shared rivers do we have? 56. Yeah. Okay. Then there's similarity in topography. Right? There's the climate impact. So there's a lot of. So what you can do together, like we have the Indus Waters Treaty, which still is operational despite all the provocations. You can have river management. You can have knowledge sharing. Say drought-resistant crops. We have to. So you can have knowledge sharing in that. You can have regional early warning systems for disaster. And you can have pooling of insurance. The more people or more countries that participate in an insurance mechanism, the more viable that becomes. Right? So when I was in the World Bank, we did a disaster pooling for the Caribbean islands. Right? And took a long time. But once we had enough countries on board, then that became operational. Disaster risk. So insurance pooling, right? So if you bring in a big country like Pakistan, and a very large country like Afghanistan, area-wise, then you make the chances of risk insurance happening become better. So these are regional. So. I want to finish by saying that you can ignore lots of commonalities which all of you in South Asian University know: language, culture, shared passion, history, and so on and so forth. If you wish, you can ignore those. You can, some people will do, but you cannot ignore geography. That your neighbors are there, like it or not. Right? So, if you ignore your neighbors, treat them as if they don't exist, then you are going to suffer, and the region and the people are going to suffer. It's your loss, right? As I said, other regional groupings will remain relevant, but South Asia, because of its own geography and the contiguity of the countries of South Asia, they also remain very relevant. And as I've sought to place before you, if you have these, in particular areas, if you have deeper cooperation, there are huge benefits which we are not even the tip of the iceberg when it comes to exploiting the benefits from that kind of cooperation. I mentioned that you can see the trade numbers, the air connectivity, bilateral pairs, all of that. So, therefore, if we continue to follow, as we are doing currently, the fragmented approach to South Asia, which means that we have 3 large countries, and if we continue to ignore one of them, right? Any one of the 3 you cannot ignore. 3 of them have to be together. Otherwise, the outcome is always going to be suboptimal for the region. For so many, as I hope, you saw and you at least somewhat convinced on that. And as I said, on climate and the environment, we don't even have the luxury of saying it will be good. If you don't do it, the outcomes will be dire. There's rise in the sea level. You could have climate refugees in the millions, tens of millions. Okay, and then by then it will be too late to control. Okay, all right. So some of our work, if you want to, as Professor Chaturvedi mentioned, he already listed all of these. But this, what I presented to you in the talk today, this is actually a new paper that I have written, and it's coming out soon in your namesake institution, Institute of South Asian Studies in Singapore. They are publishing a volume, so this is the chapter on fragmentation that I have there. And you can connect with me with different social media. And we've also started a new venture. My colleague T.G. Srinivasan and I, we started a new venture called Trade Sentinel. And basically, that's the website, tradesentinel.org. And basically, this is to bring the trade back into the development conversation. South Asian countries are very protectionist. So apart from not trading with each other, they're also very protectionist. And they have been raising tariffs, all of them, including India. They've all been raising tariffs for the last decade or so. And so whatever gains they have made from reducing, integrating better with the global economy, they are dissipating. So we're trying to bring trade, global trade and regional trade, back into the development conversation through that venture, Trade Sentinel. So thank you very much for your attention. I am happy to stay as long as necessary for questions.
Thank you so very much. We could not have asked for more this afternoon. What an insightful and inspiring talk. We have geographically proximate yet geopolitically distant. And that needs to be addressed. May I now invite questions and comments from the audience, please? I will go as per my side. So I saw you first. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself. Then I'll come to you and our two friends in this call. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, sir. My name is Maggie, and I'm joining as a PhD student in the Department of International Relations. So, sir, I wanted to know whether if it's a lofty goal to think of a common currency in South Asian context, like as an economist, could you shed some light on whether it would be beneficial or would we gain something out of having a common currency in the South Asian context? And my second question is kind of from the opposite side, because when we discuss South Asia, we don't include Myanmar, but when I went to Myanmar and I was surprised to find that Indian currency holds a very big significance there. They were willing to accept Indian currency, and I was wondering whether Indian rupees has gained the status of a dollar in the South Asian or the regional context. So if you could throw some lights on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So my name is Aryam. I'm a master's student in the Department of International Relations. So I do have two questions. The first question is about the nature of trade in South Asia. So India, of course, enjoys trade surpluses with all of its neighbors in South Asia, sizable trade surpluses at that. So when most of the countries which are surrounding India are facing a lot of monetary and fiscal distress, poor forex reserve condition in their economies, how do you think that it will be beneficial for India to expand trade with them? So, second question is that, sir, of course, the elephant in the room when we talk about trade in South Asia is security and geopolitics. But even in trade forums like GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, where the security situation is much better than South Asia, the intra-regional trade is just 8%. And mainly it is attributable to the fact that most of the countries in GCC are producing very similar kind of goods. So in the case of South Asia, can that be a factor that most of the countries in South Asia are, agrarian countries producing similar kinds of goods? That's why it's not, worth importing and exporting those goods within the borders. Thank you, sir.
My question to you would be that between India and China, it was the 80% of the medicine potential that we talked about. Security continues to drive the rhetoric between the two nations. How can we as young scholars work towards changing this? And that would be
India, Pakistan.
India, Pakistan.
Yes.
Sir, thank you so much for the talk.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Shivangi Keswani. I joined as a master's student. Thank you so much for the talk. It was very insightful. My question to you is it that the idea of the idea that is now being promoted of Akhand Bharat and maybe the Hindu Rashtra actually increasing the skepticism in the region and hence the trade tariffs going high, or are there more economical reasons also after it? And another question that I have is certainly that you proved that India has benefits, but what about the other regions that actually see the big brother effect out of India? The skepticism that lies. India is gaining more and the other regions may not. Is it a
Regions or other countries?
Other countries, sorry. Other countries.
So I am Keshav from Department of Political Science. So I have one question that what is the South Asian misery and how India and Pakistan relation is contributing to that?
Misery?
Yes. Means what are the conflicts between why the South Asian region has such a low intra-regional trade between these countries?
I guess we'll come back in the second one, yeah?
Okay. Thank you for all those very good questions. The common currency is that even within the European Union, there is only a subset of countries which have a common currency union. Right? Not all of the countries are part of the currency union. So it is a currency union is in some sense a very advanced step of economic integration, and it is not necessary to have. You can have very strong trade integration. You can have a customs union, which means basically you have a common external tariff, which is again, right now we are just talking of free trade. We're not talking of a common external tariff. But the next step could be a common external tariff. So currency union comes even after that. Right? So it is maybe the pinnacle, one of the the EU now does common regulation and harmonization. So they have a lot of their national decision making is subservient to the European Union. Right? So they have given up some of these, what we call typically decisions that will be made at the national level, given to the EU. Right? So that's why there are elections for the EU, because it's a very important body. So I think there are many problems with having common currencies, because it's not the same, your fundamentals are not the same. So two countries with growing at a very different pace, where productivity improvements are different, then it creates a problem for the country that is tying in with the larger country of the common currency. But that of course doesn't mean that others cannot use the rupee, or as globally the dollar is used, it's accepted in most places as a medium of exchange. Similarly, I mean in Nepal, in Bhutan, in Myanmar, Sri Lanka, you can, I mean the Indian rupee you can use, and now yes, certainly India is making attempts to make it a bit more global. So we are trying to foster rupee trade and all of that, but we're still very far away from that endeavor in creating a currency that is convertible, globally acceptable. We're trying to, for example, rupee trade with Russia. We proposed that, it's not working. So Russia says, I would rather trade with you in yuan, in the Chinese currency. Right? So there's acceptability. You have to become very big in the international system before your currency can truly become an anchor currency. Okay. So the question was, I'm glad this question was asked, whether countries are already in distress economically, and can we have further exports to them? We already have trade surpluses to them. Can we then actually have what does it mean? Does it make sense economically to push even further for trade integration, increasing exports and imports? So, very important question from I don't know if any of you are pure economists, but this is trade 101, right? You trade with another country, so a bilateral trade deficit doesn't really mean anything to an economist. It's actually a meaningless term in economic terms. It has a currency politically. Politically, India complains of a large deficit with China, Bangladesh complains of a large deficit with India, and so on and so forth. But you trade with another country because you benefit from it. Okay? What does Bangladesh, for instance, you're talking South Asia, what does Bangladesh import from India? 60% of its imports are pure, there is machinery, capital goods, automobiles, automobile spare parts, food, and so on. Everything is almost in the category of necessities and things that they need for re-exporting. They use textile fabrics, yarn, a lot of that. And they are the world's second largest exporter of garments. And they are using inputs from India, from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, and from China to get them. Right? So it's absolutely fine. Trade, the largest trading countries are also the largest exporting countries are also the largest importing countries. So exports and imports are two sides of the same coin. In most countries, if you look at history, this sort of balance out over the long term. Imports are needed for exports. Imports actually, if we had more time, we could have gone into a whole different, longer explanation of this. But suffice it to say that trade is not, yes, you have to pay for trade. So what matters is not the bilateral trade deficit, which is what the question was. What matters is the overall trade deficit. with all countries in the world. And more than the trade deficit, what matters is the current account deficit. And what's the distinction between the two? Between the trade deficit and the current account deficit?
What includes services and what doesn't?
Remittances. Current account includes remittances. Okay? And the remittances in South Asia are very high. So in Nepal's case, it's 23% of GDP. Remittances. Pakistan 6%, Bangladesh 6 to 7%. Right? So it's very high. So they help to keep the trade deficit the current account deficit in check, and therefore, so if we are at all concerned about deficits, it should be at a global level, my trade with the entire world, not as a bilateral. India has a massive deficit with China, has a huge deficit with the United States, which Donald Trump used to keep complaining about when he was in power. Right? So that there's a bilateral, those happen and they have to, as far as the economic distress is concerned, that has to be treated independently of trade. Trade happens because the private sector wants trade, makes sense for them. Actually, it's helpful. You import because it makes sense to you. So another question was on, we're producing very similar goods, so actually can we trade? I mean, does it make sense? Is it a surprise that we don't trade much? Actually, so, there was this old, that was okay when you were only talking about final goods. But over the last 30 years, there has become more and more trade in parts, what we call value chain, supply chain. Trade in intermediates. That is the most dynamic part of world trade, is trade in intermediates. India is not a single country if you look at the prosperity of different regions, right? The 5 states of South India are much richer than the rest of India. So their demands are getting closer to middle income country demands. So they will demand imports which are closer to the income patterns that mimic that. So from other countries. So different states have different, so one is that the demand itself is, with the different disparate growth in India, the demand itself is changing. Secondly, trade in intermediate goods actually means that this argument that we don't have goods complementarity doesn't hold anymore, because we are now in a world of supply chains. So, we can, Sri Lanka can export rubber tires to India, and then MRF factory in Chennai can churn out those tires and then export them to the US. So it's a value chain that you have created. So, those make now more and more sense in the world. Your question about what can young scholars do? Very good question. Okay. I think one is, of course, keep talking about, at more sectoral levels, the possibilities on trade. Look at how trade has become used as an instrument of peace creation, right? It's now fashionable to say, after the Russia invasion of Ukraine, it's become fashionable to say that, peace and trade, that argument is now debunked. But it's not true. I mean, there are circumstances and there are events that happen, but you have so many counter examples as well. So it's not a one shot debunking. You can find lots of examples. I mean, India's biggest trading partner is who? China. And does India say it's its most difficult relationship globally? It does, right? So, you can trade. China wants to swallow up Taiwan, but do they have a very vibrant trading relationship and an investment relationship? Yes, they do. So, you can have, so we have to keep pushing this argument. You're trying to keep the trading separate from the politics. and trying to demonstrate the gains, the losses from not doing it. And sometimes it makes a lot of sense to show how people, sometimes a single picture of there was this, during the Syria conflict, there was one single picture of a girl who came onto the beach. Yeah, that single picture made more impact than all the news reporting, thousands of news reporting on, about the costs of the people of the Syrian war. So I think human stories, I'm trying to say is human stories as well, have a very powerful impact. So there are many different ways to get at these issues, but I think this, unfortunately, this India-Pakistan used to have a lot of studies done, 5 to 7 years ago, till 2014-15. After that, it's kind of died down. But I think we have to be ready. It's not always going to remain this way. I'm pretty optimistic. There have been periods, pretty bad periods in the past as well, where, for years on end, there was no relationship, there was no trade. I think we have to be ready, and we have to keep showing, proving as researchers and scholars that what we are losing, and most importantly, what the people are losing. Question on tariff increases, are there economic reasons for it? Ostensibly, yes. The idea is to create a domestic industry. But remember, how long has it been since independence? How many years?
76.
Yeah. So, how long are we going to trot out this infant industry argument? So, we forget our own, since 91, India, Sri Lanka, all the countries of South Asia gained from reforms, right? So, Bangladesh, again in the 90s, India's crisis and trade reforms that began in 91. We should not forget our own past and how we succeeded. In fact, I'm doing a project at CSEC right now on manufacturing competitiveness and so on, where these tariff issues are front and center often. But if we want to, as I said earlier, what is the most dynamic part of world trade? It's what we call value chain, trade in intermediate goods. That's the fastest growing and also increasing share of world trade. If we levy tariffs on trade, on intermediate goods, we cannot be a part of global value chain. If we want to replace China as the world's next factory, it's not going to happen with the kind of tariffs that India has today. Our average tariff levels today are, latest data, 2023, 17% average tariff. Cars, 100%. Okay. We cannot be, it's inconsistent with being a global player. Every rich country in the world has tariffs which are 2 to 3 to 4%. Our biggest competitors, China and Vietnam, their tariffs are, a fraction of India. Okay, so it doesn't work. I think this is an attempt to try to foster this manufacturing, increasing the share of manufacturing in GDP is the goal. But I'm afraid this is not the way to go. We need a different vision where trade is part of the solution and we don't use trade as an obstruction. The question on India, does India gain more on trade? Does India gain more from trade than other countries?
That was not my question.
What is it?
Regarding India and Pakistan relation and how this is affecting the whole South Asian region.
Yeah. I think we talked about that, right? So if you don't have, it affects Pakistan, of course, because they're not part of the South Asian, the value chain that India is creating. It affects everybody because this East-West connectivity has become, a non-starter. East-West connectivity with Central Asia to South Asia because of this roadblock in the middle. So this is what So the eastern part of South Asia, the BBIN countries, are suffering because they cannot access the Central Asia. Similarly, Afghanistan, Pakistan suffer because they cannot access even South Asia, let alone Southeast Asia through. So I think it is everybody suffers, but for sure, Pakistan's biggest missing market today is India. There was a piece I wrote in Foreign Policy last year, called exactly that. It is, and it is just goes beyond trade. If the trade with India, there is so much more positivity that will come about in the Pakistan economy. Provided trade is allowed to grow to potential, not the legally constrained levels that we used to have pre-2019. They barely used to export $300-400 million to India. But in 2015, we said the export potential to India was $80 billion in 2015. Today, if you extrapolate that, Pakistan's exports could go to increase by 80% just by exporting to their full potential to India. Imagine a country which goes hand in, going to the IMF now to the 25th time, more than any other country in the world. If they were able to export to India, not just export but import cheaper goods from India, it would help the balance of payments. It would help in so many different ways. They could have energy. They have amongst the highest energy costs in the world. India has surplus energy capacity, what we call stranded energy. We have so much of it. Could easily set up trading with them. We actually were quite close to it in 2013, 2014, before politics intervened. So there's a lot more than, and of course it's not only Pakistan. Everybody else also suffers as a result. And the last question we had for this round was on why is there low trade in South Asia? Many reasons. If you just go to the economic reasons, the book Glass Half Full was about precisely about that. But you have, as I said, trade costs are very high. You have non-transparent tariffs. So we put more constraints on each other's trade than we impose on trade with the rest of the world. So in other words, Bangladesh, when it imports from India, from South Asia, 45% of its imports go outside the so-called, go into the sensitive list, right? So they don't give tariff concessions through the South Asia Free Trade Agreement. So then there are non-tariff barriers. There are, as I mentioned, the very high costs of trade, and all underlying this is the trust issue. But that can be alleviated through trade. If we can get trade growing, then gradually, one step at a time, the trust deficit can be addressed through trade. We don't have much of investment. That's another big issue in the region. Indian companies export to the rest of the world. $10-15 billion a year, they invest overseas. Less than 1% of that investment goes to South Asia. So it doesn't create the kind of value chain that we can talk about. But this can be a separate session in itself.
Thank you. I think we'll go for the second and final round, perhaps because we are running short of time. Please keep your questions as concise as you can. So I'll start with you here, then I'll go to the back, then I'll come to you, and then I will turn in this direction. Right? I can see everybody also at the back. So please, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. I am Krishna Kumar. I am a student of Masters in International Relations. And thank you. Is this on? Yes. Good evening, sir. I am Krishna Kumar from Masters of International Relations. And my question is that, are there any external factors? When I say external, I'm talking about factors which are from beyond the South Asian region, external factors which are influencing the trade and the regionalism in South Asia. For example, maybe the trade wars between other countries or other treaties. So, are there other external factors which also influence the regionalism in SAARC region?
as well as to what extent do they actually impact the region? Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. Good evening, sir. I am Ayush Gupta. I am from Faculty of Legal Studies. So I have a question about the integration part of it. You talked about integration of rather non-profitable markets into the economy will benefit. So I want to ask, how will they benefit the economy to grow? And also you talked about the investment part. So how is it like that India is not a good host state for the investors to get involved in investments in South Asia? And you talked about the protection of domestic industries. So in most of the cases that are being filed by the domestic industries, most of the cases are against China and Vietnam and Taiwan. So, and in most of the cases, domestic industry is able to get the protection. But how is it the growth perspective is going on in India, because most of the material retardation cases are successful in India. So, and anti-dumping duties are imposed. So, what is the growth perspective in trade, mostly in GATT? Thank you.
For India?
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful lecture, sir. I'm Arundhati Tiwari from the Department of International Relations. So the region of South Asia is a conglomeration of post-partition, post-colonial states, and there's several socio-political and cultural cleavages which hinder the regional growth. Do you think the desire to integrate economically can overcome such challenges, something that the Southeast Asian states have been able to do?
Hello. My name is Prakriti Malla. I am from Nepal and currently pursuing PhD in the Faculty of Legal Studies. So, my question is in relation to the question that was already raised in relation to external factors. So, in my PhD, since my PhD is also related with the South Asia concept, so there I found that there are many international organizations which are not recognizing the South Asia as a region. Except in the World Bank, I didn't find the major ILO, especially in the area of law. Like they have really recognized the concept of South Asia. So my question is this affecting the regionalism that these countries were promoting and that somewhere is hindering, the further progress of the region? Because SAFTA was there, but somewhere it is dysfunctional now, and the objective that the SAFTA set has not been achieved. So is that can be constituted as an external reason for the lack of development of the regionalism in this region?
Good afternoon, respected all. It's me, Chokran Sivedi from PhD students, economics. My question is that, as you mentioned that South Asia is highly vulnerable to climate change impacts, and that can be felt in the melting down of ice like in Nepal and rising the sea level further, like in India, Bangladesh and Maldives among others. In line with the global moves towards net zero emissions, the Southeast Asia is also starting the financing strategy to carbon intensive sectors to renewable sectors. And whenever the financing is shifted to renewable sectors, so there could be some price tested between the carbon intensive assets to renewable assets. So with these fronts, how we can proceed towards maintaining national as well as regional financial stability and the welfare of the nations at Southeast Asia. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understood the question. Is it that was it how do you go from carbon intensive to renewables in a sustainable way?
Yeah.
or is connected to that of South Asia? Because considering the regimes such as the free movement regime or even the border huts, these are something which we are connecting to Southeast Asia rather than South Asia. So how do you think, or what could be the probable way we as northeastern region is connected to that of Afghanistan or Pakistan in the future? And it is also some way or the other it's getting connected more to the BIMSTEC region. So should we rather focus on BIMSTEC rather than South Asia?
Two questions there, and we call it.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Thank you for the enriching session. Sir, my question is, given that for regional integration in South Asia, the primary thing that needs to be addressed is in India-Pakistan relations, right? That's given you mentioned. So for that to happen, there needs to be a change in the worldview of Pakistan from prioritization of geoeconomics from the present priority of geopolitics. Something that maybe General Bajpa previously mentioned, but was more of a flash in the pan than anything else. So given that it is an external factor that India cannot change, is a suboptimal outcome of India integrating with the other countries of South Asia except Pakistan not a viable option for India, number one. And number two, sir, given that India is an economic behemoth in the region, in the South Asian region, can India adopt a non-reciprocal economic attitude towards all its South Asian regions? Or as an economist, you believe that weaponization of trade can be a policy for India at certain times?
Finally, the final question.
Hello sir, thank you so much for such an enriching session. My name is Yuvraj. I am a master's student in the Department of Higher. So, despite having given Pakistan the status of the most favored nation, of course it was rescinded in 2019, but in spite of having given that status to Pakistan, why haven't we succeeded in increasing our trade footprint in Pakistan? Of course, you've already explained the implications of the trade deficit that we have in Pakistan in the previous questions. But so, what is the way forward? During the initial phase of your presentation, you also mentioned upon the air connectivity. So, how are India and Pakistan losing out because of the difference in because of the loss of air connectivity that we have with Pakistan, and because of Pakistan with other few nations, both in terms of air as well as land connectivity?
Okay, go back here. Lots of questions. Let's see. Okay, so start with this issue of external factors in trade. Okay, so what are the external factors that are influencing South Asian trade? And you mentioned actually the trade wars. That's actually, in some sense, in some strange way, that's, if you look at South Asia as a whole, South Asia should benefit from trade wars, right? Because China is the world's largest exporter, it's the powerhouse exporter of the world, and if it is facing much higher tariffs in the United States, then other countries should be able to take. But that's actually a positive factor from a South Asian perspective in terms of possibility of additional trade. There are many external factors that affect. Obviously, the broader point of trade wars is also the issue of China diversification. Everybody is looking to diversify away from China, so not be solely reliant on China as the single country. So that's, again, that is a very important issue, external issue. So you might say global tailwinds are good. You know, they're pushing you, provided you can take advantage. It's not that, because there's lots of competition. There's Vietnam, there is Malaysia, there is Thailand, there is Mexico, there is Turkey. All these countries have benefited a lot so far from the diversion of trade from China. India and Bangladesh, which are the two biggest exporters in South Asia, have not benefited as much so far from this trade wars. Another sort of, you might say, external issue in South Asia is obviously the whole China issue. Right now, China has in fact, in one of the largest markets, that is Pakistan, China has a free trade agreement with Pakistan. Now, I don't know how many of you knew that, but what does that do? Whereas Pakistan doesn't have even a trading relationship with India, even pre-2019, as you said, it was not MFN based, right? So Pakistan did not have it. Whereas with China, it has signed a free trade agreement. Now that hurts Pakistan again, because they don't get their products from the cheapest source possible, right? So in other words, India would be competing with China in Pakistan had there been a level playing field in Pakistan for the Pakistani market. And who would benefit? Of course, Pakistanis would then benefit. They would get cheaper and a much wider variety of products. So this is something that is very obvious to a trade economist, right? So you can't have trade. This is an obvious kind of trade diversion that is taking place towards China. And the Pakistan Business Council actually raised this issue many years ago when this was. So yeah, the short answer is that there are many issues in external issues. After all, trade by definition is external, right? It's your engagement with the rest of the world. So there will always be new things emerging. If by any chance Donald Trump comes to power again, that will be a huge external issue for the entire world to take care of, because he has threatened 10% tariffs across the board to all countries. And of course, there will be more punitive tariffs on China. But this 10%, when average tariffs in America are barely 2 to 3% today, and you're going to impose 10% on top of that, so 4 times an increase. So that's going to be a huge event, seismic event in trade terms for the world. So I think there's this question about why is India not investing in South Asia? Am I reading the question correctly? Yeah. So there are many reasons, right? So one is that when Indian firms invest abroad, they're also looking to acquire technology. So South Asia doesn't have that. So when Tata acquires a Jaguar or a Chorus Steel or something like that, it's looking for technology acquisition. But there is also this issue which my good friend Saman Kelegama, God bless his soul, he used to talk about in Sri Lanka, which is that he wrote a thoughtful paper on why there is some overt issues about Indian investment in other South Asian countries. Kind of suspicion which other countries, investment say from China or Western country will not have the same level of. This is all related to the issue of trust, asymmetry and the big country, It's always going to be a big gorilla in the giant country in the neighborhood. There's always going to be trust issues in the neighborhood. So India has to realize that and work towards that goal in an incremental way. But I think if we were able to, Indian firms could invest a lot more if this regional value chains could happen. This is not happening, right? So this report that I mentioned, the regional investment pioneers in South Asia, we talked a lot about that. If regional value chains started happening, the other countries were more receptive, they had better trade facilitation, they lowered their tariffs, then India could foster, by investment, could foster regional value chains. And I think that would give a big fillip to investment. So this question on protection against China and the growth perspective on trade in India. Yeah. Okay. So the broader, if I interpret that correctly, what is the role of, how can trade play a role in growth in India, right? And is that, I don't know who asked this question, but am I interpreting it correctly? Who asked this? Oh, I got it completely wrong. Nobody's owning it. Okay. I think this was, as I mentioned already, trade, we need to fix our vision on trade in India. And every country in South Asia for that matter. They are even more protectionist than India is. Okay. Trade is a development tool. It's not something that you keep out foreign goods. So the whole role, I can even submit to you, the whole goal of exporting is to import. You may not see that intuitively. Why do I say that? Because imports are consumption. And what's the ultimate bottom line for welfare is consumption. Right? How do you measure poverty? Through consumption. Consumption happens through production and imports. So the goal of exports, the bottom line goal is to be able to afford imports, right? So that welfare is enhanced. So I think we have to cast a new vision for trade. Now more and more people are writing about this. I think yesterday, my colleague at CSEP, Monte Ahluwalia, a distinguished fellow, he wrote a paper, an op-ed in Live Mint about India's trade and protection and all of that. Lots of people have talked about it. So I think we need to have a proper vision and not forget that our success in trade owed to what it owed to, our liberalization and a vision for the role that trade could play in the economy. I'm sorry, I may not have, in noting down the questions, what is that called, the error of, I'm communicating, what is that, there's that movie, I don't communicate well with myself. Can the economy help overcome integration? What's that? I don't understand what I wrote. Who asked this question? Yes, please, Han.
Integration of non-profitable markets.
What?
Like the small market where you can't get enough profit, even then you are integrating in your global value chains or trade.
So, remember, trade is a private sector activity. Okay? No private sector player is going to go just because he or she is exhorted by the government to go and integrate. No, that's not how trade works. That's the beauty of trade. It makes sense only if it is profitable. It makes sense for that firm to go make a value chain with Sri Lanka or vice versa. Will it happen? And yes, you can, at the margin, you can kickstart that by giving some incentives, by giving some land. I mean, for Sri Lanka, there's a very good investment of Sri Lanka in Vizag. There's a government company which runs a park there, and including its own investment. And it was sweetened. The deal was sweetened by some Andhra Pradesh government's incentives. Right? But at the end of the day, no firm is going to, simply go somewhere because they're told to go. It has to make sense economically, and therefore, the India-Pakistan trade, it makes all the, so this is the opposite to what you're saying. It makes so much sense to do India-Pakistan trade that people are still doing it. We're supposed to have a ban, right? In theory, Pakistan has a ban on trade with India, except on a case-by-case basis, they can allow essentials and whatever. Guess what? Official statistics from India show that India exports over $1 billion, official, still last year, over $1 billion of exports to India, to Pakistan. Not to mention all the other stuff that goes via Dubai. There's a lot of round tripping that happens. Right? So if trade makes sense, it will happen. And that's why there is so much potential in trade with Pakistan. This question, sort of the political kind of question, is that others don't call South Asia, outsiders. So is that a roadblock in integration? As I said, the name is less important than what you do, right? I think so. I am not sure that I will, I would put too much value on that proposition. Yeah. How to go to renewables in a sustainable way to move from the carbon-intensive energy to renewables. And the implicit question there is it renewables more expensive and therefore will be more difficult? Well, very interesting that maybe you know it already, that India now is now the home to maybe the second cheapest solar power in the world. Right? And I think maybe, they're in the deserts of Saudi Arabia may be cheaper because of the sheer sun, but whatever. But India is also a market there, so probably economically it makes a lot of sense. So renewables have more and more renewables are passing the hurdle rates, which earlier they couldn't cross, right? In fact, in solar it's become so obvious, right? The only problem is now more complementing the sort of, because you need peak power, right? You can't afford to go offline, off grid, so you have to complement the renewable with the normal power or the peak power, and the load surges during the evenings or at night. And how do you have the storage? So those are the issues that are, but the production part itself has crossed hurdle rates long ago. And hydro is a very good mix. Hydro gives you renewable but also gives you peak power, right? So hydro is very good, and I believe it was only politics that held back Nepal's exports for 50 years, or exports of power to India. My many friends in Nepal lament the fact that politics has prevented. Nepal could have been the richest country in South Asia instead of being amongst the poorest in South Asia, had it exploited its power. But because of politics, they said we don't want to export power to India because India will benefit. Right? I mean, simplistically speaking. So the fact that Nepal would benefit didn't really come into their argument, but that they didn't want to have India benefit. So that's, thankfully we've crossed that hurdle. Now people are seeing that these are economic arguments, there's huge benefits, and some of that power is also used in Nepal domestically. Incidentally, I know we're getting late, but I have to ask this question. Why would somebody need India or Bangladesh? If I'm a big investor into a 500 megawatt plant in Nepal, to make it viable, why do I need India?
Labor cost is less, population is more.
No, it's simply because I don't have enough demand in Nepal. I don't have, so even when you're talking 500 megawatts, already you're talking $1 billion investment or more. I'm not going to invest unless I have a guaranteed offtake agreement from India. That's what happened. Took a while for that to happen, but it's happened now. Right? So there's guaranteed offtake. Without that, no investor, no financier will sign on the dotted line, because there is not, and Nepal is spread out, and there are mountainous territories getting transmission and all that. It's difficult. But the benefit is that now, because that investment takes place, part of that goes into Nepal to reduce or eliminate its own deficit, its own power deficit. So that's why, that's a brilliant example of how regional cooperation helps both, exports, but also the domestic consumer. So there was a question on Northeast region, that isn't it more natural to connect to BIMSTEC and Southeast Asia? Sure, because that's where you're placed, right? That's where the Northeast region is, and by the same token, it's more natural for the 5 southern states of Sri Lanka to, as the Prime Minister, current President Vikram Singh has always said, his market is the 5 southern states of India. That's whom Sri Lanka should focus on. So you trade with your neighbor, your contiguity. Geography is important, right? We came back to the same thing. Geography. Same way, Punjab, trade with Punjab, right? On the other side. That's what makes sense. Why should I in Ludhiana? I have to source my cotton yarn from Coimbatore. I can source my cotton yarn from Lahore. It's much makes much more sense, right? So yeah. The question on geoeconomics in Pakistan, absolutely. I do think Pakistan needs a different mindset of putting the economic priorities first. I've written about it. And integration with India and others in South Asia is extremely viable, and I've said it's actually essential now for Pakistan to get out of this constant need to keep going back to the IMF. Right now we're discussing a $7 billion program, the 25th extended fund facility with the IMF. It's a huge, and I don't see anything currently in Pakistan which will lead me to believe that this is the last one, as the politicians are currently saying. This is the last time we go. I see nothing has changed in terms of the fundamentals in Pakistan. But I think integration with India can help in answering some of its problems. The question was on weaponization and why not, even though India gave MFN to Pakistan, should trade be weaponized, right? That was the question. I think trade should, the question is if you weaponize trade, then you lose trust. The first time you weaponize it, to get around that will take decades, because the negatives, anything that you do negatively, it's a long memory. People forget the good things, they don't forget the bad things. Yeah, India's 2015 blockade of Nepal, they haven't forgotten. And they will continue to remind India to this day of that. That has set back India's relations with Nepal for a long, long time. Right? So, be very careful. We should not weaponize trade. In fact, we should rule you, as I said in response to another question, how to use trade positively as a tool of peace, rather than, certainly not in the Russia-Ukraine manner, or where it has been used elsewhere. And the final question was, why hasn't trade with Pakistan, even in the best of times, why wasn't it high, why didn't it increase, and what's the way forward? Well, if you remember, in 2011 and 2012, there was a whole roadmap. Those were the heady days of Bailar. There was a lot of optimism in the air. I was involved actually from the World Bank side. We were very close to signing a trade agreement, MFN, what Pakistan called, they hated the word MFN because it's a most favored nation. Okay, we're trying to make friends with India, but most favored nation in Urdu means Nihayati Pasandida Mulk. Wo to mera, I don't love India so much. So they changed it from most favored nation to non-discriminatory market access, NDMA. That was the term that was used by General Musharraf and others. Right? So he is the one who is reported to have said this. मैं इतना भी नहीं प्यार करता हूँ उनसे. So yeah, I think the way forward was laid out. India has always practiced asymmetric trade in a good way with all its neighbors, including Pakistan, by giving MFN when it was not reciprocated, by opening up its market to all LDCs in the region. Even India-Sri Lanka FTA, it's asymmetric. India gives early harvest. India's access to Sri Lanka is much more delayed. So that's in the nature of large countries. All large countries practice asymmetric trade to give the other countries, the smaller countries, confidence that don't be scared. I'm with you. Let's trade because it's mutually beneficial, but I'll give you time to adjust so that your industries know, okay, 10 years down the line, that's when you have to open up, not today. So your sensitive sectors you can protect for 10 years, 20 years or whatever. So there's a way to do it. So the roadmap was laid out and it was a great roadmap. There was a people-to-people connectivity, there was visas, there was a trade dispute settlement mechanism, there were many things in that. And I think that could have then led on to other things. I do believe that, we should not say that $2 billion of trade is what. That is two and a half is the maximum we ever achieved. At least the formal trade. There's still informal, the Dubai trade always happening. But that is nowhere close to what the potential is. That was a highly constrained trade. Roundabout trade, only 137 products allowed via the Wagah border. Why not everything? That is the most natural trading point, but only 100. So, and potential if you reduce tariffs and all. So even in 2015, we had said that 2 billion could have been 37 billion, right? So you can extrapolate based on that. So it's the tip of the iceberg, and so so as I tell my students in my class, which I call trade, trust, and peace, trade is good in its own right. You don't need the peace argument to foment trade. As we know, India, China, Taiwan, China, many others, troubled relationship. You don't even need the peace argument to make the trade argument. But if you get the peace along with it, that's like icing on the cake, and it works very well. And there are many instances in history. Of course, the most prominent being the European Union, where you use trade as a positive force. So, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be still working on South Asia after 15 years. Am I not been an optimist? That's the way I am, and I hope that one day, sooner rather than later, we will see that come to fruition. Thank you.
Carried away, I took too long to answer. In response, let me say that the loudness of the clap speaks for itself. The very fact that everyone here in this hall is still full of energy and enthusiasm speaks volumes of the kind of knowledge and insights we have gathered this afternoon. There are occasions when you are left speechless. I think this is one of those occasions when I simply do not know how to thank you enough. But I would still say that we are deeply beholden to you, Professor Kasturiya, for not only taking out so much of time for us, but giving us such remarkable insights. What are my key takeaways? I'm not going to say anything except very briefly the major takeaway that I'm taking with me is that passion and commitment matter the most. Trade, trust, and peace. I have requested him to share more about this course that he teaches at Ashoka, so that we can also use his work and his more recent writing and the courses that he teaches to develop a more robust agenda, research agenda for the Institute of South Asian Studies. Your point that hope matters and optimism matters, I think that is very important, because if I were to respond to the question, what can young scholars do? I would say that one thing they can do and they should do is that they should realize that what Dr. Dhananjay has also been writing about, don't let the mental borders come up, because the fact is that physical borders may come down, and they will come down one day. The rivalry, the enmity between France and Germany is no longer there. But Germans are also realizing, Aussies and Westies, so East Germans and West Germans, that Berlin Wall has gone down, but the mental borders take longer to get dismantled. So keep thinking, keep dreaming, and SAU is a space which allows you to think together, dream together, get into all kinds of conversations, and make sure that you don't let the subcontinent turn into a subcontinent of fear. So that's all I have to say. as sort of to propose a vote of thanks. First of all, first and foremost, once again, many sincere thanks to you, Professor Kathuria, and we really would love to have you back. The sooner, the better. Secondly, I would like to thank the vision and the mission behind the South Asian University, and to our president, Professor K.K. Agarwal, founding vice chancellor, as you all know, of the Indraprastha University, and the chairman of NAC. He will, of course, you will have the chance to listen to him, and I'm sure you will agree with me when you will listen to him that he has very inspiring vision for South Asian University, for the higher education landscapes, and he is the one who will continue to guide us towards our goal, that is knowledge without borders. I'm very confident about that. I would also like to thank all the officials of South Asian University, the acting presidents, vice presidents, acting vice president, acting registrar, all senior officials, my fellow deans and chairpersons who, most of them were here, some of them could not be here, but they are very supportive, they are very kind, and I'm sure that as we continue to build this project called the Institute of South Asian Studies, we will travel, we cross these disciplinary boundaries, and we will create a new narrative, we will create a new discourse. I am also very grateful to my colleagues, Dr. Dhananjay in particular, Dr. Shamita, my chairperson, Dr. Jayashree, Nabroon, Dr. Shweta, everyone, for holding my hands. We work like a team. We don't believe in individualism. We think like a team, we work like a team, and without their support and cooperation, this would not have happened. And all future events you will see will be the outcome of collective efforts and collective initiatives. So I'm very grateful to all of them. I would also like to thank our IT team, our colleague who has been standing here for such a long time, making this video. And this will be on the archives of Institute of South Asian Studies. Our website should be ready soon, now that the Executive Council has met and the project is going forward, operationalizing the Institute of South Asian Studies. A research board is going to be constituted, which will have experts from all over South Asia, all the member states. So I can promise you one thing, that in the weeks ahead, you will be participating in some very exciting academic events. So many thanks to you, and very sincere thanks to Harsh, Ankit and Bhuvam for all that you have done to make this event a success. You know, South Asian University, if you also look at our alumni, we are very fortunate. We get some of the finest minds, and when they perform extracurricular activities, you see how wonderful singers and dancers. And when I was telling them some of my, like Harsh, I was discussing with them that, you know, we have this institute, we have to work together. And so they came out with all these wonderful ideas, wonderful plans, and we can do this, we can do that. And that I'm very confident that in the times to come, all of you would be contributing in one way or the other with your very special, gifted talents. So I really want to thank each one of you, my very dear students and scholars, and we'll continue to work together. So I think maybe in my excitement and overwhelmed as I am, I've forgotten certain names, but my sincere thanks go in all directions. Again, Dhananjay, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Jayashree and all my colleagues. So thank you, and samosas, I mean, we don't have samosas anymore now, but we do have pakoras, I think. and a cup of tea. I don't know how warm or hot that tea would be, but we have whatever we have. So you are very warm welcome to stretch your legs and have a cup of tea, and see you again in the near future for another event organized by Institute of South Asian Studies. So thank you.